Hello and welcome to Global Eye. With me, Parikshit Luthra. Dozens of classified US military documents were leaked online, which not only expose sensitive state secrets, but also a glimpse into how the United States gathers information. The leaked documents were about Ukraine's military strength and potential shortfall of arms and ammunition. The documents also had warnings that Beijing could supply lethal weapons to Russia if Ukraine steps up attack using NATO arms. The leaking of these documents reveal how deeply US intelligence has penetrated into Russian military to warn Ukraine about Moscow's war strategy. Now, the Pentagon confirmed that these leaked documents appear to contain sensitive information, but it also doesn't rule out possibility of doctoring. Meanwhile, Moscow said the leaks might be a deliberate attempt to mislead Russia's offensive. To decode the credibility of the documents and its potential impact, we're joined by Mark Cancian, Senior Advisor of International Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. How damaging is this to the Ukraine war effort, first of all?
Well, there's no question that it's embarrassing. There's a lot of very candid information in there that's embarrassing not just to Ukraine, but to other allies, Egypt, South Korea, Israel. There aren't any smoking guns, though. There's nothing in there. There hasn't already been commented on in the open press, so it's not as if there is new information. What is embarrassing, though, is that it's coming from the United States government, particularly at a time when the United States government is trying to portray a solidarity with the Ukrainians and a lot of optimism about their future.
Right. Does it really impact the spring offensive that we are going to see in Ukraine now? Russia has promised to step up attacks. Ukraine is also gathering support from allies with ammunition and weapon systems to fight back. Do you think this will hamper Ukraine's ability to fight back?
I don't think so. Ukraine's ability to fight back is going to be driven by three things. First, it's the weapons and munitions that the United States and others are sending to Ukraine, and that's not going to be slowed down at all. In fact, that flow is continuing. It's also going to be affected by the training that the Ukrainians are receiving from NATO and the United States, and that's continuing also. And finally, by the determination of the Ukrainian people, which is not affected. So it's not going to have an effect on the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The Russians, of course, complain and say that they'll launch attacks, but they're already doing that to their maximum ability. They're going to go over to the defensives shortly when the Ukrainians launch their offensive.
Right. The other point, as far as U.S. intelligence gathering abilities go, there have been reports about how the satellite information gathering capabilities of the United States have been revealed through these documents. Do you think there is any kind of specific, very classified information which is now out in public domain, which may impact the United States?
The short answer is not very much. The documents are classified as secret and top secret, but that does not include how they got the information. People have looked at them and inferred how we might have got that information maybe from satellites, but our capabilities there are well known. A lot of it probably comes from electronic surveillance. And of course, there's been harassment of U.S. spy planes out in the Black Sea. So that's not really news either to the Russians. So the bottom line is, I don't think that sources and methods were really endangered.
At this juncture, the U.S. Justice Department is carrying out an inquiry into how this happened, Mark. How do you think this is going to proceed? And what all will the U.S. government be looking at? All this came out on an online platform called Discord. There is some amount of information available about the user who had posted these documents, this package of documents. What do we know so far, and what will the U.S. government now do?
Well, starting with what the U.S. government will do, it's going to restrict the number of people who can see this information. That's going to make it a little harder for decision-making. But this has been very embarrassing, and clearly current procedures are inadequate. In terms of who did it, there's a lot of information out there about the person. It looks like it was the information was posted on a gaming website because of gaming interests. And there was just a lot of other information so that the U.S. government is going to find out who this person was and why they did it. that'll tell us whether this person was a foreign agent, was a Russian spy, or whether this was just a young person who foolishly took some documents because of their interest in online gaming.
Right. As far as the U.S. Relationship with some of its closest allies, do you think there will be some questions raised?
Well, the biggest question comes up with Ukraine, because a couple of the revelations in the documents are, again, not really news, but are embarrassing. One of them is that the Ukrainians are running out of anti-aircraft missiles, and that could cause a problem. The other one is that the United States is less optimistic about how successful the counteroffensive will be than maybe the Ukrainians and maybe other commentators. It believes the United States that there will be modest territorial gains. I think that's probably realistic given where we are. But again, Ukraine believes it's going to be much more successful. There are embarrassing revelations about the Egyptians, for example. And I think we're going to have harsh words for the Egyptians, because it's reported that they were going to sell missiles to Russia. There's some embarrassment with the South Koreans about providing artillery, but that had all been in the open press.
Right. There were also reports how there were around 97 special forces personnel from NATO countries who were involved in Ukraine, how the UK special forces had trained the Ukraine military as well. Do you think this could be a factor that Russia will now keep in mind? Do you think this is something that could hamper further training, further support from NATO allies to Ukraine?
Well, that was a piece of news that was not known before. There had been suspicions that there might be special forces in Ukraine. This seems to confirm that there were at least small numbers helping to train the Ukrainians. The Russians will certainly point out that these are boots on the ground, that NATO is now actively participating in the war. I suspect that the United States and NATO may pull some of these troops back. Keep in mind, though, that almost all of the training is done in Europe. That is in Germany and Poland and the United Kingdom. So it won't affect most of the training, but it will affect some.
Right. Now, coming to our final set of questions, Mark, as far as the U.S. government goes, do you think there has been a certain lapse, certain gaps on its front as far as the presence of this information in social media goes? According to the Times, this was reported on the 5th of April, but it is widely believed that it had been on the Discord platform for at least a month. And according to some reports, all this information was already available since January.
Yes, that's very embarrassing and constitutes a very serious security leak, really the most serious since the early 2000s in the Bradley Manning document leaks. First, how this person got a hold of these documents and was able to photograph them. That should not be able to happen. And then posting them online with no one noticing, again, very surprising. So yes, a major security breach that the Pentagon is going to work hard to close.
Right. Any steps that the West will have to watch out for, which Russia could take now as a result of this information that has been gathered?
There's not really very much that Russia can do. They're already doing everything they can. They've mobilized their forces. They've gone on the offensive. They've launched attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. I think you'll see some changes in their propaganda, pointing out that NATO is on the ground, claiming that NATO is now a combatant. But in terms of what they do, I don't think there's really much more they can do. Their greatest challenge is coming up. That is, when the Ukrainians go with the offensive, can the Russians hold or will they break?
And finally, Mark, what will be the next phase of support that you think the U.S. would have to lend Ukraine? How will they now have to support Ukraine in the war effort, considering that we're not seeing any kind of solution in sight as of now?
Well, the success of the Ukrainian offensive will be critical. If the Ukrainians can show real progress on the ground, even if they don't clear all of their occupied territory, but if they can show, for example, as they did last fall, that they can launch successful offensives and to retake territory, I think that will encourage supporters in the United States and NATO. The great fear in the United States and NATO is that this is a forever war, will go on for many years without resolution. So if the Ukrainians can have some success, I think that the support from the West will continue. On the other hand, if the Ukrainians fail, then this concern about a forever war will become more prominent, and there may be more pushes for a negotiated settlement, which means a settlement in place, leaving the Russians with the territory they've occupied.
All right, Mark Cancian, thank you so much for joining us with your perspective on the intelligence leaks on the Ukraine war, how this could impact or how this may not at all impact the U.S. effort to support Ukraine in this war. So let's see how things pan out in the days to come as far as this investigation goes. Let's shift our focus to the Taiwan